and welcome back to CUPOFTCG. We're continuing the almost weekly uploads at this point, and for very good reason. We've just come back from the Calling Liverpool, and our very own Finlay Shepherd decided to blow our entire local scene and us out of the water by, well, placing in the finals of the Battle Hardened on Sunday. Guys, I mean, bloody hell, it was a great weekend. Finlay, you've got to be... Have you come down from the high yet, or are you still kind of hyped about, like, how well you performed?
I've come down from the high, but it was very fun. And, you know, it feels good to have gemmed well.
It feels good to gemmed well. Is that literally what it felt like initially? It was like, bloody hell, I've got some good matchups.
Yeah, until KO, it felt like this is good.
Fair enough.
You know?
Fair enough. Callum, of course, you and me were there. We were just chilling. We didn't do as well as Finlay did, of course. You and me not playing the Battle Hardened, deciding to do some more side events instead. Did you have a good weekend though?
I absolutely cleaned up on some ticks, mate. I picked up Victor this weekend. I traded in for all the cards for him and played some Victor and had a hell of a time.
Brilliant. Nice. Well, chaff aside, let's get into the real meat and potatoes of why we're here. Finlay, of course, coming second. So close to winning the Battle Hardened here in Liverpool, here in the UK. On Boltyn, kind of a pet deck for you, Finlay. I suppose the main question, why Boltyn? Of all the decks in the format now, I think out of the 26 heroes that we got, why are you playing the One Light Warrior?
Boltyn is pretty good into the current meta, I'd say. Like, he does have bad matchups coming from heavy hitters. So, as I said to Callum and Carl the day before I decided to do the Battle Hardened, I said, if I can avoid Kasai and Dory, it will probably be a good day for me. Because the rest of the field and popular decks like Bravo, Dash, who was extremely prevalent that we weren't really expecting, Fi, although Fi seems to have dropped off a bit, and Levia, which we were expecting a lot more of, I feel pretty confident in the Boltyn matchup into these decks. And Victor, I didn't have many reps into, but seems Bravo-esque in that Boltyn punishes him and makes all his cards block too. So Boltyn seems like a good choice if you can avoid Kasai, which I was fortunate enough to do.
How long have you been on Boltyn now? I mean, obviously we know it's been a minute, but this is a little bit different from your original deck, which was Kano. How long have you been teching for this warrior?
Yeah, I think probably about 6 months. It's hard to think of an actual time frame, but I played it in the Calling Birmingham. I think that was a Calling.
Yeah.
That was just after. So actually, it was when Dusk Till Dawn came out that I started playing Boltyn, and that was with Helm of the Sharp Eye. So then when Bright Lights came out and we got Warband and extra support, the deck got much better. And, you know, it's been fun to iterate on a deck properly. It seems a very good hero. Beating
the New Zealand national champs on stream as well, Calling Birmingham, being the only person to get to day 2 on Boltyn and kind of having a hell of a run there as well. And, well, it seems like you stepped it up a little bit going into the Battle Hardened. Well, I feel like we've vamped enough. Let's get into the deck list. What all you are really here for, let's have a look at the spice that Finlay has brewed up. And I pass it over to Callum.
So, as an ex-Boltyn player myself, there's some things here that I'm seeing that are some new stuff joining the equipment suite. Finlay, talk us through Warband of Bologna, Ironsong Versus, and tell us a little bit about what the deck's trying to do.
Yeah, so the deck is a Raiden deck. The main board and most of the cards are part of the Raiden focus game plan. So the new cards that we got from Dusk Till Dawn and Bright Lights are Ironsong Versus and Warband, and we'll go over Ironsong Versus first, I think. This card is really phenomenal because it lets you give a relevant on-hit to Raiden, and if the decks are going to let Raiden hit, it means that your next turn isn't stopped by the classic sort of approach of saying no blocks to Boltyn, because of course if I play an Engulfing Light and charge it, you can say no blocks and I lose my turn unless I snaps or play something at instant speed. The other thing this card lets you do is pitch power cards or just clear dead cards out of your hand, and Boltyn does have a bit of a problem with that when you draw multiple power cards you don't want to see at the moment, so it's really excellent. The ability to just throw a card back into your deck is really, really strong, and Courage is a really good token for Boltyn, and it's temper too, so
It
5
almost
stars.
It almost feels like the courage token was kind of made for Boltyn, right? It definitely helps enable and smooth out some of those little bit more tricky to navigate turns.
Yeah, it also smooths out the cost curve of the deck a bit. Boltyn's, I think, has always traditionally been a Tunic deck, but on turns where you don't have Tunic, you don't really want to be pitching a red to play Take Flight or cards like that. So this actually gives another good use case for your yellows. Just a great cost curve fixer. Warband is interesting because ideally you don't really want to be using it in Raiden. It's here as a failsafe, and the issue with the keyword charge and Raiden as a weapon is that you need to draw a card that says charge in order for your turn to be functional, and Warband basically gives you one get out of jail free card. To put it into perspective though, I think in about 19 CC games I played over the weekend, I activated Warband's actual effect once, but it blocking 3 is still enough to warrant it as a brilliant headpiece. It's a bit more relevant in Sabres, I think, because you can use it to start a combo. But yeah, really, really strong card, and it definitely earns its place over Crown of Providence or Balance of Justice.
Cool. Right. So again, like you said, Tunic, Snaps, kind of staples to the Raiden game plan that we've seen pre-Dusk Till Dawn. Let's go onto the main deck. As you mentioned earlier about not necessarily wanting to pitch reds and pitching yellows and stuff like that. First thing we notice, no blues in here, right? So obviously you have a requirement to play a lot of yellows. Talk to me about the sort of ratios between yellows and the deck building puzzle that is Boltyn.
It certainly is an exercise in cutting as much fat away as possible. Dusk Till Dawn introduced the requirement of having to charge a yellow with certain cards, which basically says, my hand isn't functional without yellows. Beaming Bravado is a prime example of this, so you need to be able to work out a ratio you feel comfortable with in this deck, and what I/we, when we collaborate, have settled on is somewhere around 33 yellows and then 27 charge cards that have the keyword charge on them and let you activate Raiden and Boltyn. You can go to about 24 charge cards, and maybe 30 yellows, but the deck, you start to draw a lot of 4 red hands, and 4 red hands really suffer because Beaming Bravado and the other cards that require yellow to be charged are excellent, and not being able to use them in those hands really hurts. Often they'll end up being a turn where you have to use snaps or something like that, and obviously you only get one shot there. The other deck building requirement that Boltyn has is the fact that the majority of the cards need to be light, because otherwise Luminar Ascension doesn't work. So you need to say, like, I want to have about 6 to 8 non-light cards in this deck to be consistent. Blues, I think you would add if you were doing a more combo-focused deck, and this deck, right, as I said before, is meant to emphasize Raiden.
Would you class this deck as relatively aggro or more of a mid-range sort of build?
I think it's an aggro deck. Like, it tries to race other aggro decks, like you're going to race Fi, boost dash. It certainly has the potential to go mid-range, because the great thing about Boltyn is that you can always throw your hand on the table and say, I block 12, and you keep going. And you do have good defensive cards like Soul Shield that you can add to the deck, but you are aiming to be the aggressor. You're certainly not going to play a slow game against Bravo, right? You need to be applying pressure.
So you've got the yellow base, you've picked your ideal reds, right? Let's talk about some standout cards for you over the weekend. I mean, you've spoken to me personally about how powerful Beaming Bravado is, and as someone who played Boltyn before Dusk Till Dawn, this sort of card almost functioning similarly to a zero cost take flight. I mean, that seems pretty powerful, right?
Yeah, it's really, really good. It is a little bit of a trap possibly, because it is not soul positive like Take Flight. Soul positive meaning that you net one card in your soul across the whole turn. So Beaming Bravado, your sort of ideal gameplay with it is you play red Beaming Bravado and you charge a Banner of Courage. And that gives you an attack coming in for 4, which you can activate Boltyn's hero ability on to give go again, and then swing Raiden for 4, which is like the classic Icelander rate, but it has Boltyn's hero text on it, so the cards can go up to 5. It just being a guaranteed starter is what is really powerful, because nothing feels worse than having your turn ended because someone blocked with a non-attack action or just said no blocks.
So talk to me about the bannerets that you've got in here. You've opted to play Banneret of Courage and Banneret of Gallantry, which make a Courage and Quicken respectively. They don't charge themselves. Is that an issue?
It does. It is an element of inconsistency in the deck, but the fact that the goal is draw a charge card, draw a card that you are happy to charge, so not one of your power cards, and then draw a power card or a finisher or something to arsenal. These two bannerets in particular are so good that they probably will always warrant a space in the deck. Yeah. Banner of Gallantry saves you a activation of Boltyn, which means that you get to use Celestial Cataclysm more. It also has really good synergy with E-Strike, which we'll move on to it in a bit, I assume. And Banner of Courage is a turn enabler because you can just charge it and move on, and then the next turn you've got a Courage token ready to go, and it turns on the other non-starter charge cards like Bolt of Courage and Engulfing Light.
Yeah, so I see you have, as you mentioned, Bolt of Courage and Engulfing Light in the deck. These are some classics from way back when. Bolt of Courage always has been a very scary card. It's a snatch in Boltyn, so a light snatch that blocks 3, pretty good. So why don't you include a card like Snatch in a deck like this?
Snatch is a card that I think a lot of Boltyn players are on. We saw it in other Boltyn lists that have done really well, like Yuki's deck, etc. The reason I don't like Snatch is because it takes up one of the precious generic slots that are in the deck. It also does block 2, which is quite a big deal. A few of my game plans involve effectively just conserving health at the start of the game, particularly into Levia, and having to block with Snatch is pretty disastrous if it does happen. The other reason is that I don't really feel like the deck top decks that well. So if you were doing a long chain with Snatch in it, it's after you've swung your Raiden, or you're going to draw into a card that you are costed out of, like a Banner, a Take Flight, or a Valiant Thrust, or you're going to draw a starter like Beaming Bravado that you actually don't want to play at the end of the chain. Yeah. So I'm not massive on it, but that doesn't mean it's a bad card. It's certainly an option.
I mean, from my perspective, one of the best cards you can play at the end of a chain instead of Snatch is Illuminate.
Yeah, Illuminate is a really excellent card. It works in almost all stages of the game, so other than turn 0 because your opponent will block it out, but it satisfies all the requirements. It's a 3-block, it comes in for a breakpoint, it fills your soul, which is really important and enables your more powerful plays. Anything that fills your soul is enabling Seacat and Beacon, which are essential for Boltyn, basically. And Illuminate is also a good 1-card play, and Boltyn is pretty desperate for 1-card plays. I mean, this is the only 1-card play in Boltyn, apart from playing Spirit of Irina.
So you mentioned Seacat, you mentioned Beacon. Let's talk about a few of the power cards in the deck, right? So Beacon, Seacat, obviously important to conserve some soul for some games to try and get these cards off. I think everyone knows what Luminous Ascension does by this point, right? I mean, you still see some people reading it, but talk to us about the power cards in the deck.
It's a fat tech box, so I understand why people just keep reading it. It's huge.
I mean, maybe we know what Lumina does a little bit better than some others because we've been testing it differently for 6 months.
It is one of the advantages of Boltyn that people are uncomfortable playing into him, and the hero ability does force misplays out of people. So that's not about Lumina Ascension, but little anecdote. Lumina is a card that enables you to go soul positive, and against an aggro deck, they're not going to be happy to block this because Lumina will make your Raiden come in for 4, and if they block with their attacks, which will be in their hand, it's coming in for 5, so they have to give you 2 cards, and if they're 2 blocks, then they have to give you 3, so it's not going to happen. The fact that it adds cards to your soul from the top of your deck means that the turns after you've Luminaed are going to be even more powerful. So when you're playing against 5, for example, your goal is to just find a Lumina, play it, and go from there, basically. And the good thing is that you have 6 Luminas in your deck because Beacon allows you to search for it. Lumina is also, basically the weapon against the defensive decks as well. They will always try and full block this, and if they fail to and you manage to pump over, you're going to start really snowballing out of control. Because, like I said before, with other soul positive things, it enables Celestial Cataclysm, and it enables you to do your extremely long chain link V turns.
So let's talk about V, because as much as playing against Boltyn, we dislike seeing Lumina come out. I think I'm probably most scared of Via the Vanguard. Tell us why I might be scared of this card.
This card enables probably the most powerful plays in Boltyn, and certainly when paired with Lumina, it is probably the best thing Boltyn can do. So this card basically turns every attack you're playing into a breakpoint. It means that you can Boltyn every attack that is played on the chain. It's what Boltyn is building up to do. He plays on this sort of, because it's a Tunic deck, you do play on this sort of building up game plan where you have mediocre turns and then an extremely powerful turn, and then mediocre turns and an extremely powerful turn.
So you're always playing this card off Tunic, pretty much, right?
Yeah, if you have a Valiant Thrust in your hand, particularly the red one, which is the only one I play, you are happy to pitch for this, pitching a yellow, because you're still going to put out very abusive numbers. But the ideal situation is to play Tunic, charge 2 light cards, and then have a lovely long chain of attacks, threatening like an Engulfing Light or Illuminate on hit and a Bolt of Courage on hit. This will always draw blocks, which is what Boltyn sort of needs to do against the scarier decks that can present on hits, like Bravo, for example. If you play a Bolt of Courage next to after you've played a V, they are guaranteed to block it.
Cool. I mean, there's only really one other card I want to talk about in the main deck that we've not gone over yet, and that's the inclusion of E-Strike.
Yeah, E-Strike is a bit contentious, and I think the main complaint that most people have about it is that it can be extremely clunky in a lot of hands. And I'm not sure I'm fully used to using this card yet, but it is worth noting that it synergizes really well with both of the bannerets and with Boltyn's hero ability. And what I mean by that is, if I play a Beaming Bravado and I charge a Banneret of Gallantry, I can then give the Beaming Bravado go again with Boltyn, and I can play E-Strike, draw a card, or +2, but probably draw a card because that's a little better. And it will have natural go again. And E-Strike draw a card with go again is, one of the things you dread when Fi plays it and snaps it, and it's equally good in this deck. It is also a decent 2-card play if you have had to block a CNC or something like that, which is quite common for Boltyn. And it does have really good applications in the end game for Raiden, because, for example, when you're playing against a Slab Dash in the end game, you'll be on low, they'll be on low, and you'll draw a hand that's like Engulfing Light, a card that needs to be charged, E-Strike, and any card. And the nightmare scenario, as I've mentioned before, is that you play your little charge starter for 3 Engulfing Light, and they block it with a non-attack action or say no blocks, and you've lost a 4-card hand, so you completely lose tempo.
Yeah.
And in this situation, E-Strike lets you go, okay, E-Strike for 7, I get to give it go again with Boltyn's hero ability, and then I can play my charge card, and it will take their whole hand, and probably they will have to block with an attack action at some point, which will then enable you to swing Raiden after you've played your charge card. It's very good, but it is a little clunky.
Seems like a very flexible card, and like you said earlier, Boltyn being a synergy deck, like you're looking for very specific things in all of your hands. E-Strike, similarly to how it works in other decks, looks like it smooths out a few of those creases sometimes, right?
I mean, with the point of being able to charge a Banneret of Gallantry off the back of a Beaming Bravado, and then being like, E-Strike, draw a card, and also I get to do one of the other effects. This is just choose 2, and like, if E-Strike red, choose 2, that's insane. I think every deck would run it. So the fact that Boltyn gets to do that for free is
I think
really...
people are used to remember Briars and decks that used to get free go again off stuff like that.
Yeah.
Used to seeing E-Strike draw a card with go again, and it's a very powerful play. So I can see why Finlay's tried to line it up in this deck here. Do you want to speak about Spirit of Irina quickly?
Yeah, Spirit of Irina is the card that enables Boltyn's specializations to work together. So with Via the Vanguard, you can't, before Spirit of Irina is played, you cannot play Luminous Ascension alongside it, because Luminous Ascension, in order to play it, you have to break the combat chain, and Via the Vanguard only says for the chain Via the Vanguard is on. So once Spirit of Irina is out, you can play your Lumina essentially at instant speed, and your deck becomes significantly more scary. If you see Spirit of Irina early into defensive decks, and even aggro decks, but most importantly defensive decks, your win rate goes up a significant amount, because they can no longer confidently block your Luminas, because they will block you. They will only see the Raiden for 3, so they don't know what the final card in your hand is, and then you get a free action point by playing Lumina, because when you play Lumina at instant speed, you get an action point because it has Go Again, and you get a free card going into Soul, because it's very unlikely they're going to be willing to commit a D-react if they've already committed a 3 block to your Raiden. There are niche cases where you can use Beacon of Victory to search Spirit of Irina in extremely slow games, but that is tricky because it's hard to, you can't always play the Spirit of Irina immediately, and but it is worth noting Spirit of Irina is really good. It is the only 0 block in your deck, and sometimes you'll be in an aggro mirror and you'll know that Spirit of Irina is going to be in your hand soon, and you will die because you drew a no block. So it does happen.
Yeah, I suppose the percentage points it has to help you against those slower matchups, to set up those really powerful 5-card hands, really sort of offsets the risk of playing 1 no block in your deck, right?
Absolutely, and it's not even worth removing it in an aggro matchup, because if you play it in an aggro matchup, your deck is significantly more powerful anyway. So
because of what it does for your soul economy, if you will.
Yeah, exactly.
And one other thing we didn't directly mention, of course, searching for Spirit with Beacon, but also this Spirit on the board already. Beacon is literally a Lumina, because you pump it by X and you search for a Lumina, being able to instant speed play it on that Raiden that you just pumped by Beacon as well, buffing it by an additional 1, and now it has the Lumina effect. I mean, this is, Callum, I think you and me can both do a test to this, testing into this deck God knows how many times. Hell, when this happens, it's like, oh cool, it's Beacon, it's Lumina. Guess I die is basically what this combo turns into.
Yeah, as soon as Spirit's on the board, it becomes significantly harder to play against Boltyn. You feel like you really feel like you're playing against a warrior with combat tricks at that point.
Yeah. Often people who are experienced into Boltyn, once Spirit is on the board, will tend to play around Lumina being in hand a little more, but they'll never overblock Raiden by 2. Beacon, you can't, because you lose too much value. So Beacon will, again, almost always guarantee that Raiden hits. It's also worth talking about Beacon and just saying that sometimes you have like 8 cards in your soul and you kill someone with Beacon, because you can't play around Beacon for 8 every turn.
Anyone who suffered the fate of combo Boltyn will know the threat of Beacon post-combo. Speaking of combo Boltyn, if we scroll down a little bit here, we'll see that this deck has a combo sideboard in it.
Yeah, so I would love to be able to remove combo from this deck, because it does take up a lot of slots in the deck. We're talking, 4 extra equipment pieces? The thing is that the deck just has a very poor Katsu matchup, and or rather the Raiden game plan has a very poor Katsu matchup. And the mirror without combo is very tricky if you're playing into a Boltyn that does have combo. And to be honest, 2 combo Boltyns playing against each other is also pretty miserable, but at least it's basically a 50-50.
Either you do it or I do it. Let's wait and see.
I remember back in the ProQuest in Leeds about a year ago from now, I was on combo Boltyn, and in round 6, I found the only other Boltyn in the room, and they comboed me before I comboed them. So that it does feel pretty bad, but I can see that combo Boltyn is a necessary evil in the deck currently.
Yeah, it is worth noting that the deck is worse at combo than a combo focus deck would be, obviously, because blues are particularly good in the combo plan, and not having access to D-reacts like Fate Foreseen, it makes the plan weaker, but it's still the best option into Katsu.
Combo looks a little bit different here though, right? We're historically seeing 2 sabers.
Yeah, Hot Streak seems to be really, really good. Centauri Saber is really powerful in Boltyn, because when you've charged, if they block your Saber with a attack action, it gets pumped by 2. Hot Streak is similarly punishing, especially into decks that are, 90% attack actions, because they're going to be giving your sword go again for free if they decide to block it. And maintaining soul, even post combo, maintaining soul is important. There's nothing worse than playing a game having executed your combo and your opponent's on about 10. And then you slowly start draining your soul, but you're not using it on any power cards. And this punishes opponents. Again, we'll talk about Katsu or Boltyn because they're just full of attack actions. It's likely to get go again if they need to block it. It's very good. It also stops decks soul starving you when you're executing your combo, especially with a triple Lumina or something. It's very unlikely they're going to be able to block all 4 attacks of Hot Streak without using an attack action.
You said Katsu and the Mirror. Are there any other decks you're comboing at the moment?
So at the moment, my plan is to run combo into Azalea and Kasai, and we'll talk about them individually, I think. Azalea, I've had probably slightly better results with combo than Raiden. Raiden is a viable plan into her. The reason I switched to combo was that it just felt like every Raiden game I was conserving life until I found a hand that was going to be substantial enough to actually warrant taking damage to play, if that makes sense. And if you're doing that, why not just play combo? Because if you manage to play combo, you will win. The next matchup, I'm not sure about it, but Kasai is really difficult for Boltyn because it's a deck of 56, maybe 54 non-attack actions, so you're never activating Boltyn, and it gets free armor with Dynamo. The one weakness of Kasai is that she doesn't really present that much damage compared to other aggro decks like Katsu. So you can stall until you draw 3 Luminas and then do a proper triple Lumina combo with Gallantry Gold. And that is where you see the cracks in this deck, because without blues, doing a triple Lumina combo with Gallantry Gold requires you to have 2 yellows in your hand that aren't your combo pieces. And that's difficult because there's about, almost a 40-60 split between yellows and reds in the deck. So it works sometimes. I did have a Kasai Soul Starve, a triple Lumina combo against me in one of the side events I did this weekend, and that felt pretty bad. So maybe Raiden is a better choice, but Raiden also felt like a losing matchup, so needs more investigation.
Yeah, I suppose, like I say, it's a matchup that needs more testing, but fortunately for yourself, you didn't find a Kasai. Little hint towards our matchups we'll go over later, but you didn't find a Kasai in Swiss, and you didn't find one in the top 8 either, so we'll take that, I guess. Let's go through a little bit more of the sideboard. So we've gone over the combo plan. Showing 6 D-Reacts here. You've got 3 Sinks, 3 Soul Shields, kind of what we'd sort of expect.
Yeah, I mean, it's a classic defensive package for Boltyn, to be honest. Soul Shield is obviously an amazing card because it's fulfilling both defensive and offensive goals, in that it enables your C-Cats and stuff like that, and it's giving you a resource to use later on the offense. And Sync lets you dig to power cards, and Boltyn is, at the end of the day, a power card deck. These come into any deck you basically need to block, so Bravo is the prime example. And Soul Shield is very nice into anything that attacks, any deck that's going to present tool attacks, so KO, Levia, etc.
So obviously Soul Shield very cleanly blocking a crush effect of a Spinal Crash, for example, helping you block out those Writhing Beast Hulks in Levia. Just a really nice get around dominate, and also, like you said, progress your game plan of building your soul at the same time, right?
Yeah. The other D-React we have in the list is That All You Got. This card was suggested by Callum, actually, and other Boltyns are on it too. It is really much better than it looks initially. The fact that it's a yellow it adds so many points to including it in this list, because Boltyn is unique in decks in that D-Reacts aren't always dead if he's on the offensive, because you can charge them into his soul, and this of course works with cards like Beaming Bravado, Light the Way, and any other charge card that requires a yellow. It also pitches, it's effectively this deck's blue because we only run yellows. It does have, it makes matchups like Fi really much better because you can just use it on their Phoenix Flame and you get to conserve life and draw a card. It works into aggro dashes because their pistol will always be 2. It works into pistol dashes because their pistol is 2 at a point in the game and you get to draw while conserving life and progressing your game plan offensively. Really great card to include.
100%. I remember playing this card, and I played this card in Rhino sideboards. I played it when I was playing combo Boltyn as well. It almost feels unfair to keep that card after defending with it, almost like Victor's doing at the moment. Anyway, moving on. So that you got your other D-Reacts. Only 2 CNC in the list. Why only 2 CNC?
Yeah, it really is a space issue. CNC is a little questionable. Anyway, I see a lot of Boltyns are on United We Stand because United We Stand is a yellow 6 power card, so it's ticking the popper box and it's ticking a slightly different box to CNC in that also it's a light card, so it's ticking another box there actually. But United We Stand is a little more consistent because it will go into your Soul Off Lumina and it is a popper. I prefer CNC at the moment because in a few of the matchups I'm bringing it into, I think it is better to have a relevant on-hit than just a popper. So if we consider Dromai, because I don't have much experience into Prism, often they will only play, especially the very aggro Dromai, will only play a single dragon at a time, and it's a dragon you're quite happy to kill with Raiden or Light the Way or Engulfing Light or Bolt of Courage to guarantee your on-hits. So you don't always want to pop them, which means that you might want to play your CNC, and presenting a relevant on-hit is important. So that would be my argument for CNC. If I removed the combo package, possibly the third CNC would come back, or maybe it would become United We Stand.
With the prevalence of Guardian with this new set of heavy hitters and kind of the increased amount of D-Reacts that we are seeing now, is that a kind of thought in your mind around the first text box on Command & Conquer around the fact you just can't play D-Reacts to it? Or is that just like, cool, added bonus?
So I don't bring CNC into Guardian because it costs 2. That's basically why. You're meant to be the aggressor into Guardian, and 2 sometimes can be very awkward. Look, you can't play this on a turn with Take Flight or Valiant Thrust, and you can sometimes play it on a turn with V, but it has to be Tunic V holding a yellow to play CNC. So it's not bad, but the deck is good without it, to be honest. It's just a nice... Its role is a popper that can be played.
Yeah.
And United We Stand is really not a popper that can be played because it isn't doing anything. Vanilla 6 is not good enough.
It does have some nice uses into Azalea, though.
It does, although it's not being brought into my Azalea matchup at the moment either.
Really interesting.
I mean, you bring it into Azalea because you can take it back into your arsenal with Codex of Frailty and then threaten an on-hit most of the time. I just found that it was better to take cards like Seacat or Chain Starters in my experience, but it probably is a preference thing.
You've got 1 Courageous Steel Hand.
Yeah, this is
number of Courageous Steel Hands here.
Yeah, this is a card I would like to play more of. Also, probably does get a bit worse the more you play because it does block 2 and drawing multiple of them is quite bad. This card is here because I tested too much into Azalea and started over-teching defensively, so it wasn't shunt. And then when I started mapping out my other matchups, I realized that I had to put a shunt into a lot of matchups where you don't want a shunt. So the Courageous is a logical choice. It really helps you against decks that are non-attack action heavy, like Illusionist and Wizard. It's just got a surprise factor, and if you show 1, people will think about it for the rest of the game. And that is minor but relevant.
Okay, cool. And I think we're down to the final couple of cards on the list. Let's go over Boltyn Blade.
Yeah, Boltyn Blade fills a role similar to Seacat, but it's different. It's really good when you play this with a double charged via the Vanguard because it costs 0. and 0 for 9 is well statted.
Say that again.
Yeah, it's not bad, and when you've only charged once. But as I said, playing CNC can be difficult. So playing Boltyn Blade can be difficult if you've not double charged. It basically comes into any matchup where you are in danger of being fatigued, like Pistol Dash, Guardians, that style of matchup, because you need big numbers to be able to push over their block value. And Boltyn, because he has this charge requirement, is a bit like Brute in that every turn you are playing, you are actually getting rid of an extra card without attacking with it. So, my 4 card hands are 3 card hands that are charged.
Yeah. I think what we've sort of found throughout testing, and what you've done a great job of exemplifying, is how powerful Boltyn's 5 card hands can be. How powerful setting up your, I mean, it's not necessarily a pitch stack like you say, because you shuffle with Beacon, but how important it is to keep threat density up, how important it is to sort of tailor the correct combination of cards to really push damage over those blocking decks, right?
Yeah.
One card that you've shown over the weekend that is really, really good into these blocking decks, new from heavy hitters, Tenacity.
Yeah. Just one thing about Boltyn Blade before we talk about Tenacity.
Back to Boltyn Blade.
But Boltyn Blade and Seacat attack for 7, which is quite good against Prism, because she'll often reduce the attack value on these cards by 1. Although against me, it got reduced by 2, so that felt really bad. Yeah, sorry. So Tenacity. Yeah, so as I've said, Boltyn is prone to fatigue, especially if you're new to the deck. Our local meta is full of Decimator Axes and Guardians with many D-Reacts. And this card punishes that style of gameplay, and Pistol Dash. So Boltyn is a deck that demands blocks, right? The classic example is Bolt of Courage and Luminous Ascension. Let's envisage a world in which I play a Bolt of Courage with Spirit of Irina out against a Guardian. They will block the Bolt of Courage. They may use 1 card, they may use 1 card in equipment, they may use 2 cards. I then play Lumina and swing Raiden. They'll block that because they don't want me to get free value. I swing Raiden again, it will get blocked with armor. You play Tenacity, and Tenacity comes in for about 8. It is really very strong. It is a generic card, so you are reducing the consistency of Lumina, but it is also a yellow. So it's at least ticking 2 boxes. It's a block 3, it's a yellow. And I played against a lot of defensive decks over the Battle Hardened, and I had a Tenacity come in for 9 and 8. And sometimes they don't block, and it sucks. But, it still blocks 3 at the end of the day, and you can just charge it into your soul. So
Yeah, 100%. And sort of like I said, it does show that real benefit of being able to line up those hands, that you're sat there, you're presenting all this damage, you're presenting these on hits, and you might be getting blocked out, but you're sitting there happy with this Tenacity in your hand or in your arsenal, ready to really slam dunk that last chunk of damage through, right?
Yeah, people do not expect Tenacity at the moment. People, I think, have just concluded it's a 5 card and moved on. Yeah. And it really does blow people out. They're not budgeting for the 0 cost 9 power attack. Works very well on V turns as well, because cards like Bolt of Courage do demand blocks.
What a crazy sentence, by the way. They're just not thinking about the 0 for 9 that could come at this end of this combat chain. I mean, fair enough.
I mean, it counts equipment, right? That is so strong.
Yeah. I heard a number of judge calls this weekend when this came up in the side events. Didn't play in the Battle Hardened, by the way. Thank God I didn't. Would have been absolutely mauled by Finlay. But yeah, multiple judge calls over this weekend where it was just like, why is this 9? Like, it's because cards are equipment. Like, just don't. That is how it works. This card just gets so much value into decks that have a hell of a lot of equipment that they want to be chucking at you to try and turn off your turn. And at the end, when they've just defended everything, you just go 9. So, yeah, great. Cheers.
And any powerful card that happens to be a yellow is just so valuable in this deck because of the yellow restriction.
And it blocks 3. Blocks 3.
It's ticking a lot of boxes.
Oh, yeah.
Cool. I think we're pretty much through everything. Last bit at the end here, you've got a little bit of Null Rune, and you've got the Soulbond Resolve.
Yeah, this is These three cards, Soulbond with Null Gloves and Halo of Illumination, are just the Kano tax. I suppose Null Gloves could also be included for Vincent, but and Viscerai. Yeah, he exists. Yeah, so they are coming in for Kano basically, and what they give you is Null Rune 1, which sucks against Kano, but also Spell Void 3 on his combo turn, which is excellent. So when you present lethal against Kano, you also get to say, yeah, your Aether Wildfire combo is reduced by 20 damage on this turn. And it's worth noting that Soulbond Resolve is active throughout the entire game, so if you go first, which you want to do as Boltyn, you get to play your Take Flight and Swing Raiden. They will try and get some cheeky damage in with Kano, and you get to negate one with Soulbond Resolve and maybe do a bit of ABing. Most of the time you aren't going to AB in their turn because you need 4-card/5 card hands to push damage, but just having effectively Spell Void 4 on Aether Wildfire makes the matchup much harder for them.
One thing I wanted to ask from an Azalea player perspective, we know that Yuki and Ellie were playing Soulbond Resolve into Azalea with the almighty claim of it blocks 5. Of course, now you're on combo, it wouldn't come into the list for the need of Courage of Bladehold. What's your thought on that? Like, if you were still on Raiden in that matchup, is it a Soulbond match or is it actually still just a tuning match?
It might honestly depend on if you go first or second. I think if you go first... So the thing about Raiden into Azalea is you really do need to do a very powerful turn to be able to remain relevant in that matchup. And Tunic is your main enabler. Tunic makes a lot of the cards in the deck list significantly better. So V, Take Flight, and Valiant Thrust are all so much harder to play if you don't have a Tunic. So it's a big ask to drop it. Soulbond does block 3 against dominate attacks because you get to charge, but losing the whole card to block 1 is tough. It's really a steep ask. It is also worth noting against Rangers that Soulbond Resolve reduces the damage dealt by Bloodrot tokens.
Finlay, is there anything else you wanted to cover? Maybe something that isn't included in the list, or cards that performed really well over the weekend?
I think we covered Snatch, which is the card that people are most likely to include. Other than that, cards that performed really well. I mean, Beaming Bravado is really, really good. Like, very, very good. I think Light the Way is a bit niche, but possibly doesn't get the respect it deserves because it really does put people in tricky blocking situations over and over and over because, as I've mentioned a few times already, the classic thing is you play an Engulfing Light charged and your opponent says no blocks. They just don't have that option with Light the Way. And as you add more attack reactions like Courageous Steel Hand, Light the Way becomes significantly better. So, good card.
I'm going to throw back to Cole now. We're going to go through a little bit of a recap of your matchups over the weekend and just your experience playing in the Battle Hardened, really. Let's go.
Yeah, so let's first touch on the breakdown of what the weekend was. Obviously, you were one of 8 Boltyn that turned up to the event. No one else making it as far as you. But the spread on the meta was quite healthy, to be honest with you. I think it was only 3 heroes that weren't represented, those being Teklo, Betsy, and Olympia? Yeah, so 2 of the new heroes, people are of course favouring Kasai and KO, primarily with like their representation. You actually faced a KO over the weekend, your matchups being a Bravo, round 1 Bravo, 2 Levia, Pistol Dash, round 3 KO, another Pistol Dash, a Boost Dash, a Pistol Dash, and a Zuri in the Swiss. Considering there are only 13 dashes, and you played, 1, 2, 3, 4 of them in your 8 rounds, it seemed like you were just eating them. How did you find those matchups?
Yeah, Dash did really well at this event, and I'm not a Dash player, so I can't really speak as to why, but it seems like she does well into Kasai, Bravo, and KO. Pistol Dash is interesting because there's quite a lot of variety in the decks that you in the lists you see. So the Dash I played in round 3 came the closest to fatiguing me That deck was really heavy on 3-block non-attack action, so it was almost like playing against a warrior, to be honest. And I think that game ended with me having one playable hand left in my deck, and it wasn't really a playable hand. It was a lot of reds. It's as soon as you start to make them block with attack actions, the matchup becomes much easier, but their first block will always be with something that is irritating. So it's tricky. They don't present... So the pattern they're doing is a pistol shot into a 7 attack most of the time. Boltyn is in the position where all of his cards block 3, but he is basically an aggro deck, so you still follow this pattern of two slow turns or medium powered turns to build soul, and then a very explosive turn which will guaranteed punch through their block. So that will be off a tunic counter, and it will be either a take flight red, a Valiant Thrust red, or a V with Illumina and something else. And once you've done that a few times, you will have netted enough soul to be able to use more power cards like Beacon and Celestial Cataclysm to continue to punch through the blocks. And, of course, Tenacity is excellent into those decks because they want to block with the majority of most of the cards in their hand. So it gets pumped.
One thing to note about your matchups is the majority of the dashes you found were from round 5 and onwards, right? I think being in the room at the time, it just seemed like all of the top tables had dashes on, right?
Yeah, it was a lot of dash killing a lot of Bravos, basically. KO, I'm not confident because I wasn't paying that much attention to other tables, but KO seemed to disappear after round 4 and 5. There were not many KOs around me.
Notably, none of them converted to top 8, right? Being the most represented deck. So,
yeah,
not sure what that says about the other decks that were in the room, but Boltyn seemingly a very good pick looking at this meta breakdown, right?
Yeah, the goal, as I mentioned at the start of the video, was to avoid Kasai, and I was fortunate that I managed to avoid Kasai.
Job achieved.
The other, yeah, thank you, Gem. But the other sort of iffy matchups, Dromai and Dory. Dromai isn't atrocious for Raiden. Like it's not an auto loss or anything like that, but it can be hard. And Big Dragon Dromai is, in my experience, much harder than the aggro version. And Dory is just a skill check. And also, did I draw my soul shield at the correct time check? And
yeah.
if those boxes aren't met, often you end up in a situation where you're just to block 12 and you fatigue because a lot of your power cards go. What else? So it was a relief to sit down against a Bravo round 1 because that obviously is where it's the most volatile, and Bravo is a matchup I have a lot of experience into. It was also good to sit down into a Levia round 2 because Callum is a very experienced Levia player, and we've played that matchup a lot.
Still Azalea, right?
In it. And yeah, I didn't play an Azalea. I honestly do not feel like it's super unfavored, but it is extremely volatile. And if you are getting hit with multiple reds with an Arsenal destruction effect tied to it, it is really hard to recover from that.
Notably, if the pairings were slightly different, your first top 8 game would have been Brody Spurlock on Azalea as you were top seed, but he placed 9th, so just missed out on that. So our 50 odd games of Azalea Boltyn useless this weekend. So it
is also, in terms of bad matchups, it's also fortunate that I dodged the Max or the Riptide. I think the Riptide was 4-0 at one point, which is really quite epic for a Riptide.
It's terrible.
And Max is a real bad Boltyn matchup because the mech owns you because it's got 5 block on it, and you can't really punch through that.
No.
Like we've spoken about before, you do have to spend those sort of first few rounds of any CC event being prepared for anything, right? It seemed to me, anyway, just sort of walking around the tables, watching you play, waiting every round to hear that, I got another one. I mean, you went all the way up to 7-0 before dropping a game, right? Top seed, as you said. It really did seem like once you got past that sort of round 4, round 5, the top tables were all Bravos, dashes, and yourself.
Yeah, that's how I felt as well. There was a Dromai that crept up, but I only noticed that single Dromai. The KO I think I faced in round 4. That matchup's quite interesting for Boltyn. It's a bit racy. If it's basically and it's the same goes to Levia, right? Boltyn is a deck where your plan is sort of to race a lot of decks, but Levia in particular has numbers that are way better than you. So
And an armor suite to compete
and a huge armor suite. So if you straight up race, I feel like you lose a lot of the time. So you have to play this defensive. Well, my plan and that does not mean it's the right plan, but it's the plan I used, is to play a defensive game plan at the start where you conserve health until you draw an extremely powerful turn, and you can try and bait out Fleshbag. Because a lot of Boltyn, like Callum's mentioned before, Boltyn relies on 5-card hands to push real damage, and Fleshbag really likes gobbling up 5-card hands. So if you can bait out the Fleshbag or play a Spirit of Irina early, those matchups are much easier.
Like you've said to me before, it's nice to try and conserve life while you can and hope that the inevitable happens in a lot of Levier games where they fumble, they slip up, they get a bad roll, and you take that opportunity to really snatch momentum back into your favour.
Yeah, it really does feel like you can force a Levier to at least take about 5 blood debt at certain points in the game. And then Boltyn has enough combat tricks to bring them to that 13 health threshold where they don't get to play their in 5 hero, and it feels quite good. KO is quite similar because you can play at least semi-defensively into him, and you get the privilege of arsenaling a D-react and hoping they play pulping and play that type of game. But it is still effectively an aggro mirror, I guess.
So after we had the 8 rounds of Swiss, of course, you going 7 being Bravos, Leviers, Pistol Dashes, KOs, only dropping to an Azuri in round 8. That then cut us to the top 8. And I think from our perspective, being outside of it, not playing in the Battle Hardened, I think every single round of a side event me and Callum were playing, it was just like, cool, this is done. Where's Finlay? Like, what's happening? There was a point during the day, I think it was during round 5 when you were against your second Pistol Dash, which you eventually got going 6-0. That we worked out after talking to one of the judges that due to the amount of people who had turned up to the Battle Hardened, you were guaranteed top 8. And we just kind of lost it a bit. We were like, wait, he's guaranteed top 8. This is insane. Like, what's he going to go? What's it? And it was awesome to see from the sidelines, just that. And then we saw what the top 8 was, of course, you winning then your next game, going 7-0, and just seeing Callum's face like pop up after like the game had finished, and I was midway through a CC, just like looking over my shoulder, and Callum just turned and just goes, I was like, yes, let's go.
It was a hell of a run.
It was a hell of a run.
Really
and then this takes us to the top 8, which we have yourself, George Douglas, George Keys, Alex Chitu, Lorenzo, Michael Feng, Rob Catton, and Erica all qualifying on quite a varied hero pool, which is really good to see for the meta. And then you get paired into a Kano, which, as we tapped into, was the hero that you played when you first joined Fab with us. How did it feel kind of sitting down knowing that it was a Kano, of course, knowing that you have that experience kind of in your back pocket and having that tech in the deck? Did that feel really good, or were you still a little bit like, oh God, it's Kano, we can do anything?
The problem really is that it just feels like it's Kano's game, and you were just presenting damage for Kano to deal with. And so the Kano deck was quite interesting. It had Mind Warp in it, and that really was interesting because it's the only card they would have cast, I think, that would make me use AB on my turn. Apart from maybe Red Aether Flare, but even then, I'm not sure I would AB 1 on Red Aether Flare. So, Mind Warp with its Surge effect, reducing the number of cards in your hand by 1, mandating a block was pretty scary. So they found the combo quite early, and Spell Void 4 basically carried me through it, and the one Courageous Steel Hand came in pretty clutch. So it was a Kano game.
Yeah, earned its slot.
Yeah,
the 80th card.
Yeah,
It's always an important one.
Again, it's a good argument for more Courageous Steel Hands, but as you add more, it becomes less consistent almost.
Yes. That moves us on to the top 4. Me and Callum firmly losing our minds, with Toby as well at this point. And then you got paired into Alex Chitu. Was this one of the dashes you had played before on your run up to the top 8 or not?
No, this was a boost dash. I think it was pretty even, to be honest. Like the dash has a lot of attack actions is the real issue, and they find it hard to pop Boltyn. So it's not a bad matchup for Boltyn. It's just a question of how many Luminas can you find.
And then that takes us to the grand finals. Yourself, versus Rob Catton on New Prism, which was Mono Lag, the new Luminaris. Double light showdown in the finals, which is kind of crazy to see the set after Dusk Till Dawn. Well, 2 sets after Dusk Till Dawn. We obviously have Bright Lights, and now we've got Heavy Hitters. And then this is where of course, the second loss happened, and you did fall to Rob Catton. But bloody hell, what a run! Give us a quick rundown of this game. I know there's a point that we probably have to talk about, but we'll touch on it quickly. How did this game go?
I just got really smashed in this game, to be honest. I think I tried to. So I had played like 1 game into Lag Prism before this, so I wasn't really up to scratch with it, and I didn't expect how much damage the Heralds do. Like, the deck really, really smashed me, and then it runs the tech to blow your poppers up, which also threw me off. And then at one point, I tried to pop a Herald that was immune to Phantasm, which is disastrous, you know? That's a painful thing to do. And it's sad when you can hear people whispering behind you about a misplay you've made. That is really tricky in an event, especially because this is the first time I'd ever made it to anything like this. It was a fun game. I don't know what I'd do into Lag Prism next time. I just need to play it more. So the deck was very cool, though. The Luminaris Prism looks really fun, and I love that it uses Light of Soul and stuff like that. It's really thematic. And library, although not into me.
Yeah.
I mean, me and Cole were stood on the sidelines trying to be as quiet as possible watching this one. What an entertaining game, right? I mean, from our perspective, from the outside, it seemed that you were on the back foot from pretty early doors in the game, making some sort of trades where you needed to, clearing some angels and stuff like that. Yeah, I mean, what a deck coming out of nowhere. No one particularly expecting Prism to be a force to be reckoned with brutes and all of this sort of stuff coming out after Heavy Hitters. But I mean, Rob just really piloting this deck all the way to the top. Really impressive.
It was doing the same thing that Boltyn has been doing for a while, which is that people aren't necessarily ready for it, you know? And I certainly had no reps into it. It destroyed me.
Well, either way, mate, I think I speak for both of us, and I think I speak for all the locals when I say that was fucking great. Really, really good. It was super exciting to see you perform as well as you did. Obviously, you didn't go over the line at the very final step, but that's fine. Like, this is your first time getting to a top 8 and just showing how strong you are on the deck. I don't know if it means much from us, but I'm pretty confident we're all super proud of you, man. So really, really good job. And we're confident you're going to get it next time. And I think we've worked out some ELO numbers. I think you're guaranteed for UK Nats now. So we're waiting to see, fingers crossed, the Finlay Shepherd resurgence. Maybe we'll get that Rob Catton rematch in UK Nats.
I think. But we'll see.
Nice. Callum, Finlay, any final thoughts before we wrap up?
I'd say it was a really fun weekend. We played some side events, watched Finlay's run to the top. Yeah, it was just a great weekend.
Yeah, it was really fun.
All right, guys, thank you for watching. We're going to put the deck list in the description. Finlay's already shared it with the Boltyn Discord as well, so there might be some conversation back and forth in there if you want to pester him